you very much for your welcome, Erna, and it's a privilege to be with you all. As an Australian, it's a great privilege to come to Indonesia this morning. Thank you very much for listening. So I would like to start talking about honesty. And it's not by chance that honesty is the first of the standards in IofC, because it's the key to the other standards of purity, unselfishness, and love. If you have honesty, you have a foundation to build upon. We need honesty about ourselves and with ourselves, and that's sometimes the starting point. We need honesty with our family, our closest friends and teammates, and also honesty with our colleagues and workmates. As we compare our lives to the standards of absolute honesty, things may come to mind that need to be put right. There may be money to be paid back, things we've borrowed, in quotes, that need to be returned, apologies to be made for hate or jealousy or for hurts created. There may be habits to let go of or a wrong relationship to end. When I was 25, I started having quiet times. And there were several thoughts that came. Some were quite serious. To be honest with my parents about a relationship that I was in, that they knew nothing about, was very scary. And we were not in the same country at the time, so I had to write to them. Then there were apologies to be made to my previous flatmate and a lady I had boarded with. But the relationship with my boyfriend, who wanted to marry me, was very difficult too, because I didn't want to marry him. He was a good person, but I didn't feel he was the right person for me. But I enjoyed his attention, his care, and his friendship, so I hadn't broken the relationship. I had to face the fact that I used his friendship. Eventually, I was honest with him, and of course, he was very hurt. And it took me a long time to forgive myself for using his friendship and letting him believe I would marry him. Once I had started putting right these relationships, I began to feel hope for the future and also find the beginnings of a sense of purpose for my life. Honesty with my parents was hard, but it began to build a more secure relationship between us. This new trust meant that at one point I was able to challenge my father over the way he was excusing my sister's bad moods. This was very difficult because I deeply respected him, but I managed, and the result was she began to change. Slowly, I realized that change can be infectious. Change is still needed in my relationships today. Simply because I choose to have a quiet time every day doesn't mean I always treat my husband with respect. At times, I care more about my views or my opinions than my teammates. And I do sometimes get afraid of what others might think of me. When I am willing to change, to say sorry if I need to start again, to reach out to others I feel a little afraid of, it means that life is an adventure. As you can see, I've lived quite a bit of life. And life will always be an adventure if we continue to be willing to change and to follow the thoughts that come in our quiet time.
A warm hello to you all. It was following a conversation with a Vietnamese student in a Paris cafe that I took an honest look at myself and accepted the challenge of change. The Vietnam War was going on at that time, and claiming many lives. I told this young man I was concerned about his situation and wanted to ask a few questions. He kindly agreed to answer these. He also said, "You know, I have a brother fighting with the communists and another brother fighting alongside the Americans. Whenever I think about this, it tears me apart inside." Then came his very surprising question. "What do you want to do with your life?" I couldn't understand why he wanted to know about this when we were talking about Vietnam, but I thought he'd been good in responding to my questions, and I should do the same for him. So I told him about my private ambitions to become an international interpreter or a professor of languages. And do you know what his response was? He simply said, "Is that all you want to do with your life?" I asked, "What do you mean, is that all? Isn't that enough? That's going to take me long enough." His response was, "At the beginning, you told me you were concerned about our situation. Are you really? If you are, what we need are people who have the answers to the human problems. There's hate on both sides that started it, selfishness that allows it to continue, and corruption through prostitution that increases it because it makes the people in the North more bitter. And they say, 'Why are these Americans exploiting our women?' Unless we get the answers to these problems, tomorrow my family may not just be involved. Tomorrow they may die." Then he pointed at me and said, "Is that what you want?" His question went through me like a knife, and I knew in a moment of honesty that though my head was concerned, my heart was very far from that. It was focused on my plans, my career, my money, my marriage, and he had effectively challenged these. So I felt I needed to go away and review my priorities. I did that, and a few days later, I made a decision that set me on a totally different path in life. And you know what? I'm still on that path now. This led to the beginning of finding a calling for my life. I just knew deep inside that I was meant to work with the people of Southeast Asia, an area that's been through centuries of conflict and suffering, to develop healing and create trust. But I didn't really see how this was going to happen. Then in 2004, at an Asia Pacific Youth Conference, I was invited to facilitate a discussion between young Cambodians and Vietnamese who were in conflict with each other. It was a tough task, and it became clear at the end of the conference that what had started would have to continue. And it did. For 5 years, the dialogue went on with cross-border visits and homestays and the chance to talk about all the sticking points in the relationship. Finally, when they felt they had built the basis of a friendship that would last and would be a demonstration for their governments, the Viet-Cam dialogue, as it was called, was concluded. A lot of my passion for peacemaking was the fruit of a friendship with a Burmese educator, commonly known as Ma Mi. She was a wisdom seeker who reckoned to have a daily time of reflective silence. She had learned to trust these quiet times as a channel through which God could speak to her about anything. Through this kind of inner listening, she was led to make friends with some of the leaders of Southeast Asia. One of those was the Prime Minister of Thailand. At that time, there was a serious cross-border conflict between Thailand and Burma, also fueled by an age-old dispute about who owned a sacred herd of white elephants. One day, the headlines of a Burmese newspaper were all about how the trouble had flared again and how their military were bombing the Thai villages. In her quiet time that day, Mami was reflecting about this situation.
Totally unexpected thought came to her that she should return the white elephants to the Prime Minister of Thailand. Immediately she went to the market, bought a small red seed, which inside were tiny white ivory elephants. She then went to Bangkok and went straight to see the Prime Minister, her friend. He was angry and asked if she had heard the news of what her army was doing with their bombing. She brought out her small seed and gave him the white elephants. She told him, "These elephants have been away from their home for a long time, which is why they've become so tiny and small. Now they're coming back to where they belong." The Prime Minister laughed and thanked her. Within days, the relationship between Burma and Thailand was back to normal. Mami often used to say, "When people listen, God speaks. When people obey, God acts. And the result can be a miracle." Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Zaitun. It is so good to be here, to be in Bandung actually, spiritually. In spirit, I'm in Bandung. Physically, I'm in Malaysia. Thank you so much for inviting me to join this quiet time this morning. And welcome to everyone. My name is Siti. I'm Indonesian, but I'm married to Malaysian. I live in Kuala Lumpur. I have 2 boys. Everyone is welcome whenever they come to Malaysia. We can meet in Kuala Lumpur. So today I was asked to talk about purity, and this is what I had in my reflection during the quiet time. So I'm going to share with you what I wrote during my quiet time on purity. And I also would like to share with you the thoughts and the writings that our chairman, Mr. Haridas, our IofC Malaysia chairman, Mr. Haridas, wrote in his quiet time on purity. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Purity. What makes human being special is the value and the virtue they hold in their life. If we do not have value, we do not have virtue in our lives, we are no different from animal or non-human being. In IofC, in the Initiative of Change, we learn and we practice about the virtues of honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. We practice daily to take time in silence and ask ourselves what these values mean to us, and let our consciousness speak to us during silent times or quiet time. When we say consciousness, or in Indonesian language, we call it dengan penuh kesadaran, or we call it in Javanese language, eling, being aware of what we are doing. And when we want to have a reflection, on our daily action, it has to be done in a place where there is no noise or any distraction. So we call it quiet time, silent time, in a peaceful place, in a room, or any place in your house, or even in the garden. So we can always do our reflection times anywhere. So today I'm reminding myself and to others about the virtue of purity. So let's talk about purity. Purity is one of the moral standards in IofC that we learn. Purity is about motives. It's about intention. We call this in our religion, Islam, we call it niyat. Or in Indonesian language, we call it niat. Purity is also about being aware of the outward temptation, exploitation that can lead us to the dark, to the wrong direction, if we do not reflect or recheck our habits against the virtue of purity. And if we do not have the consciousness about what we are doing, about the intention we have before doing the action. By sitting in quiet time and reflecting on purity, we build boundaries and being clear about actions, activities, habits, relationships that we have in our everyday activities. In our religion, in Islam, the Prophet Muhammad said, action is by intention. Innamal a'malu bin niyat. Action is by intention. So if we want to reflect on purity, we always have to check our intention before doing the action. When our intention is pure, the action is divinely guided. This is why having a quiet time is important, to pause for a while and ask ourselves before taking steps to actions. Let our consciousness, kesadaran kita, speak to us in the silence of the day, and we write down the thoughts that come as these clarify for us in our life how we can better live in the standard of purity. We live in an age of information and entertainment, both positive and negative. Unless we have clarity about purity of our actions, how are we going to help ourselves? How are we going to help others? It is not about us trying to becoming saints, but this is about us progressing and reviewing our daily actions. As God says in the Holy Quran, that the best among you is the one who always purifies himself. Clarity about purity in our own life provide clear boundaries. It is also about what we see, what we listen, what we read, and the things that we give attention to grow in our lives. Practicing quiet time is the basic or the basis or the tool to check our purity in every action we decide to take. We review this frequently like a filter before acting on it. What is our attention? Is it pure enough? Then soon, we will progress and grow from just being a man to a mindful leader in our family, to be a mindful mother, to be a mindful daughter, or even to be a mindful leader in our society. I have my personal story about this purity, but I think I will share it later during the sharing session. Let me share with you what our IofC Malaysia chairman, Mr. Hadidas, wrote during his quiet time on purity. There are so many aspects to values. There are traditional values, social values, religious values, as well as cultural values. This will depend on the orientation of each person. One often hears the refrain that your values are not the same as my values. This is true when we speak about values in its broadest context. However, there are also virtues that all human beings share, and the four moral standards that IofC highlights talk about these virtues: honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. No religion undermines this. It is true that these virtues can be very subjective, and that is why objectifying these help us to get a grip on what we mean personally by moral standards. When a virtue is described as a standard, it becomes measurable. Every standard is absolute, be it 1 foot, 1 yard, 1 liter, 1 mile. When we take a virtue like honesty or purity and convert this into a moral standard, we make it measurable. Only that which can be measured can be improved. Silence is the basis for this measurement. You and I take part in this exercise to get clarity on what these virtues mean for us in our lives. Take time in silence and ask yourself what honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love mean to you. Let your consciousness speak to you in the silence of the day. You will soon understand that there are areas in your life, in your own life, where the standard of honesty is not absolute, or where the standard of purity is not absolute. Write down the thoughts that come, as this clarifies for you in your life how you can better live in the standard of purity. This may require some steps to be taken to restore areas and times you may have been dishonest, or you may have been not pure, not practicing purity. It is not about becoming sane. This is all about progress, and you review this frequently. You will grow from being a youth to a young person or a married person to becoming a responsible leader in your community. Likewise, absolute purity is about temptation, about motives, about intention, exploitation, and those habits that challenge you in the dark. By sitting quiet and reflecting on purity, you build boundaries and are clear about relationship. We live in an age of information and entertainment, both positive and negative. Pornography is attacking our children. What is our answer to this? Unless we each have clarity about purity, how are we going to help other young people? One spiritual leader described this as follows: the look, the thought, the fascination, and the fall. Global issues like the exploitation of women, migrant workers, children, all need to be addressed. Teenage pregnancy, mistresses, adulteries are issues that, and clarity about purity in one's life provides clear boundaries. In a real time, this is about the type of the books, the magazine, the videos, the films that we see. It is also about positive things that we then give attention to grow in our lives. Find a spiritual mentor. a teacher or a soulmate whom you respect and work on this, and you will experience like liberation in your life. You will also become a better practitioner of your faith, and change provides the dimension of realization and experience. Okay, that's what our chairman of IofC Malaysia wrote on his quiet time, during his quiet time on the purity. So, yeah, I think that is all from what I can share about purity. I hope it is clear enough for you to understand one of the moral standards of IofC, which is honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. So I hope this a little writing on the purity can give you a clarity of what purity is about. Thank you, Zaitun.
Thank you so much, Noni. Selamat pagi. I hope I say it right.
Pagi. Selamat pagi, Alex.
Pagi. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for having me, and it has been an honor to be part of the Bandung Peace Week. I've learned so much from the sharing so far. This morning, I was invited to share on unselfishness, one of the moral standards of IofC. And I would like to begin with an old Chinese saying that roughly translates as, unless you look out for yourself, heaven and earth will ruin you. This sentiment seems to apply across culture, as I also come across the English idiom, the devil take the hindmost, again stressing the importance of considering your own interests first. At first glance, this makes sense. Selfishness may be a good trait to have to ensure the highest chance of our survival. However, if every one of us just follow our selfish instinct, I think conflict between individuals will become inevitable, as our interests might clash with those of others. And this conflict may, from a personal level to a community, and then even national, global level. Thus, I find the practice of quiet time reflection particularly useful in putting a pause to examine my thoughts and actions, instead of mindlessly conducting myself without realizing whether I was acting selfishly. Earlier this year, I've worked on the translation of my mentor's memoir from Chinese to English. His name is Liu Renzhou from Taiwan, as some of you may know. To help with the translation, I consulted the biography of Frank Bookman, the founder of Initiative of Change on Moral Rearmament, MRA. I read about how he adopted the practice of quiet time. And please allow me to share the story, which some of you might know. Back in 1909, Frank Bookman began to work in the YMCA chapter of an American university. His work was to care for the students there. He was very eager to bring a positive change to the student culture there, where there were heavy drinking and parties. He worked very hard, making phone calls around the clock and arranging student meetings. But he was not happy with the progress. One day, an English gentleman visited him and asked him, "How did you seek guidance?" While Frank Bookman prayed and read the Bible in the morning, the Englishman challenged him to give God an uninterrupted time to tell him what to do. Thus, Bookman decided to give himself an hour in the morning to listen to God, which happened to be 5 a.m. to 6 a.m., as that was before the phone began to ring for him. And I was really touched that yesterday during morning quiet time, I learned that there was a friend from Sudan who joined us, and the local time for him, it was 4 a.m. So again, there were people making an effort to listen in silence. But back to Bookman, Frank Bookman. Almost a decade later, while he was working in China, he would share with the Chinese that inner listening means an unhurried time when God can really have a chance to imprint his thoughts in your mind. And for Frank Bookman, the time at 5 a.m., he became awake and conscious of the presence of God. And he will listen to sometimes inspirations for what God wants him to do, or sometimes just get that sense of peace and rest. Very importantly, this listening to God is not just the experience of a few men, but can be for many. He says it's the most sane, normal, and heartful thing a person can do. And in quiet time, you begin to realize your own nothingness. My emphasis is on the point of your own nothingness. It relates to our theme on selfishness. I also think that this practice of morning reflection is particularly relevant in our age of smartphone and social media dominance, where our minds are so easily distracted and our emotions so easily triggered. And in terms of unselfishness, I think when you sit in silence and the awareness and connection to a higher being beyond yourself can also help us to guard us from excessive selfishness. In more religious terms, the guidance from God, or more secularly, from the universe. Or maybe as Mahatma Gandhi had put it best, the still small voice within each of us. And apart from this spiritual dimension, unselfishness may also be in the form of our willingness to make sacrifice for others, for people we care for our community, or for our nation. But this may also very easily fall into a mindset of us against them. Or maybe it's our God against their God, our nation against their nation, or us against outsiders. And I speak from personal experience. In my home city of Hong Kong, many of us are very proud of our identity as Hong Kongers, our Cantonese culture, and our way of living and governance. But since the handover in 1997, from a British colony to the one country, two system within China, many changes have taken place. More and more people speak Mandarin. They may be immigrants from mainland China, and Mandarin is very different from our mother tongue. Our government answer more and more to Beijing than the local Hong Kong people. Tensions between Hong Kong people and Chinese increased rapidly, as highlighted in the 2019 protests. And speaking very honestly, I'm quite ready to make sacrifices for Hong Kong people, like donating to organizations that support, say, political prisoners or so. I also have some inside or implicit hostility towards the mainland Chinese I come across in Hong Kong. And frequently I have this hostility and I think bad things about them, even without getting to know them. While I still consider many Chinese friends I met in Chinese in action my friends, I have very poor contact with them. I make an excuse because I lost my login detail for WeChat, the social media platform, but I didn't really try to reconnect. And upon reflection in quiet time and preparing for this morning, I think this is a major barrier for peace, both within me, my interaction with others. And when I was preparing for this morning, this issue kept recurring in my head. And I have to try to put it into words. And I think it's very easy to get stuck in a state of victimhood, to think that Chinese people have wronged us Hong Kong people. But in doing so, sometimes we unknowingly become very selfish and became the perpetrator, we have prejudice or bias against Chinese people. And sometimes this may also happen the other way. Maybe some Chinese people, they stuck in the victimhood, say, for example, against Japan. And in the recent saga of the nuclear waterways, many Chinese people will try to call Japan and then there are a lot of harassment and hatred. And again, I think there are unfortunately a lot of hurt and selfishness. I'm still searching for answers in quiet time, and I'm still trying to be more aware of the us and them mentality that is within me, and try to remind myself, while these prejudices may appear, I don't have to always listen to them or allow them to control me. I can take a deep breath and listen to the voice within and make an effort to seek that voice within. I remember when I was listening to some of the MRA or IofC seniors sharing their experience, they make an apology. Some of the Taiwanese or Chinese friends, when they visited foreign countries, some of them may be colonizers in the past. They also acknowledge their anger inside us and apologize for us. I'm still towards this journey. So this is my reflection on the theme of unselfishness. And I would like to share 3 questions for reflection. I'll type it in the chat box later. In my everyday life, do I allow a quality time to listen to God or the still small voice within? If not, is it possible to make time for it? Second, in my personal relationships, has selfishness been a barrier to peace between individuals? Thirdly, what about between communities and within society? Has selfishness influenced those interactions? Thank you, and I hand over the time to the interpreter.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Rido, to put up with my English. So my name is Megumi Kanemasu. Currently, I base in Kyoto, former capital of Japan. I was trained to be a teacher, but at the time of my graduation school, I was still searching what I could offer to the next generations, not just the knowledge as a teacher, but did not have anything to offer what we are meant to live for, to respond to this needy world. The history of during the Second World War, what Japan have done to the people in Asian countries, Pacific, and the world, that was just too terrible, unforgiving fact. As a young person, I did not know how to face it. I was terrified to learn more and more on the dark side of my country. But meeting and listening to the most dedicated young and old peoples and their life stories in IofC network, it challenged me very much. They were not just thinking of their own life, but giving their best to bring a different in the societies, in the different parts of the world. I too wanted to find it out within me what I could do with my life. I began to listen to my inner voice to seek if God has a plan for an ordinary person like me. I started to face my life as what I really was like. I am the youngest of 4 children in my family. I was too self-centered and self-righteous. I was just so ignorant to care for others' needs. I always thought one of my elder sisters, she was the one who needed to change, not me. I used to pray for asking God for his help for what I need. But to listen to whatever he may have something to say to me, what he wants me to do, what he wants me to be, and obey it, that was quite a different perspective in my selfish life. But I decided to try it out, to follow the direction what my inner voice leads me, one step at a time. Ever since in 1974, when I met MRA, IofC. It is amazing to see how far my life has been led till today. It is great joy to learn how to love people and my country, its past, and as it is today, and to offer my life what God wants me to live for. If a person like me can be different, there is hope for Japan. Japan also can be different to build trust among Asian countries in the world. My eyes and heart began to open to learn the pain and face history and history of each person I meet, try to understand their lives and their countries, what they have gone through, as well as to share great joy in our life. I want to see what Japan can learn from our past, as Japan meant to be trusted neighbors in this world community. I want to live to give my best in my own life, keep seeking, listening to my inner voice deep in my heart, and obey it, which leads me to play fully my own part for the sake of new world. Life is a gift. In this needy world, there is pain more than what we can take it in. It is painful because we do care, we do love the family, friends, people. If each one of us would be ready to share our hearts and life as we are, whatever we can, to play our part to support one another, we will find the strength to live together, learning to love and to respect each other as we are. Indeed, that is the most precious gift of the hope, for that each one of us have a part to play, as everyone counts. Terima kasih.